rabbal alameen. So before we go on to our lesson in Sullam, last week we were speaking about some differences amongst our ulama pertaining to learning and this field of knowledge. So the author spoke about Al-Imam Al-Nawawi and Al-Imam Ibn Salah, that it is narrated that they mentioned that it is not permissible, and the reason is such as what I mentioned in last week, and you can find this in the commentaries, that the last time the logic or Mantiq is mixed with the ideology of the Greek religion, where they speak about their gods and so on. So in their books they speak about their belief in idol worshipping and so on. So that is why the earlier scholars mentioned that this type of learning of Mantiq is not permissible, because it can lead a person to kufr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But of course, when Al-Imam Ghazali came and Al-Imam Fakhruddin Al-Razi, they remove all these ideologies away from these books of Mantiq, and they wrote it in a sense that it is easy for the Muslim student to learn them. So Al-Imam Ghazali emphasized highly on the learning of Mantiq, and that's what we mentioned, and also many scholars who came after him took that position. But the author mentioned that if a person has a strong foundation in religion, for example, he has studied Aqidah, he has studied fiqh at a certain level, for example, he has studied in Tasawwur, then it is permissible for him to learn this knowledge. Otherwise, it is better for him to focus on the foundations. So knowledge of Mantiq is knowledge that tells us about how we value arguments and so on and so forth. So our scholars speak about the importance of having a strong foundation in the Islamic knowledge before entering into this knowledge of Al-Mantiq. So inshallah we will go back into our notes, and this week I placed the notes in PowerPoint slides. Last week I did not place them part of it, and because of time. So inshallah this is the notes that we will go through. We also mentioned a bit about what's the meaning of al-ilm al-hadith, because the author mentioned anwa'ul ilm al-hadith, the types of al-ilm al-hadith. Now we have this terminology. The word al-hadith is basically, if it is translated in English, we call it the contingent, something that is contingent, something that is derived, the knowledge that is begotten. So it is in contrary to al-qadim. So when it comes to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say knowledge of Allah is qadim. So knowledge of Mantiq, it does not focus on the knowledge that is pre-eternal, but it is focusing on knowledge that is contingent. So I translated it as new knowledge. Anwa'ul ilm al-hadith, types of knowledge that are contingent. So we are speaking about knowledge of human beings, we are speaking about knowledge on the universe and science and so on and so forth. All these are basically knowledge that is any contingent, that requires us to seek this kind of knowledge. So I mentioned a few things. This is my own commentary. So I mentioned new knowledge differs from divine knowledge, which is transcendent. The knowledge of Allah is not classified into tasawwur and tasdeeq. So when we speak about the definition of Mantiq, last time we mentioned that the knowledge of Mantiq basically has two main elements. That is the element of Tasawwur, apprehension, and the element of Tasdeeq, that is affirmation. So we have on one side apprehension, the other side is affirmation. So we have to apprehend, then only we can come into a state of affirmation. But the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not any classified as tasawwur and tasdiq. Because tasawwur and tasdiq, it is a type of knowledge that is contingent. So when we say any contingent, it is knowledge that is, what you call it, that is attained or that can be understood by the human beings. So the knowledge of Allah is not classified into tasawwur and tasdiq, not universal, nor particular. We cannot only be saying that the knowledge of Allah is universal or the knowledge of Allah is particular. But the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Aqidah we say, knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sifatun azaliyatun tankashifu biha jami'ul mawjudati wal ma'dumat. Yani knowledge of Allah is inkishaf. Yani those who study Aqidah, when you go back to the definition of al-ilm, yani ilm that is qadim, it is inkishaf. But here when it comes into knowledge of human beings, it is divided into apprehension and what you call it, affirmation, and then we have universal and particular. All this will be discussed in the knowledge of al-Mantiq. So basically, the knowledge of Mantiq does not speak about knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is in the chapter of, that is in the field of Aqidah. Knowledge of Allah encompasses everything that is known. This is the meaning of inkishaf. Here the author is speaking about other than the knowledge of Allah, thus he termed it as new knowledge. And al-ilm al-hadith. Al-hadith is contingent. And then he mentioned, now as what I mentioned in last week, today inshallah ta'ala we will enter into Mantiq. Yani this is the lesson that we enter into the contents of the knowledge of al-Mantiq. So he mentioned in the next part, idraku mufradin tasawwuran ulim wa darku nisbatin bitasdiqin wusim. Aywa. So now we have a few things here. Yani we have a few things here. Number one, he said, understanding a particular word is tasawwur, that is apprehension. While understanding the occurrence of the associatement in a sentence is tasdiq, affirmation. So what is the meaning? So let me demonstrate. What I will do is I will just demonstrate a simple sentence. So the sentence is this. Maybe I start with the Arabic sentence. I will explain the Arabic part, and then the translation, so that we get both, and we get in the Arabic understanding and also in English. So in Arabic we say Zaidun qa'ibun. I'm typing this with my mouse, so that's why it's not really what you call it, proper. Zaidun qa'imun. So in Arabic we have this, we call it the mubtada. In English we call it the subject. So this is a sentence, correct? No? Zaidun qa'imun. This is the khabar. In English we call it the predicate. So when we translate in English, we say Zaid is standing. Okay. So we have the subject, and then we have the predicate. Okay, basically what the author is saying, there are a few things here. Number one, we have Zaid. In Mantiq we call it mawdu'. Mawdu', this dot, mawdu'un. The predicate we call it mahmul. So you need to get yourself one. This is mahmul. So in Mantiq, and we say this is mawdu and this is mahmul. And then we have something that is binding between the mawdu and the mahmul. Yani now what we are doing, and we are associating the act of standing to Zaid, correct or not? When I say Zaid is standing, I am associating the act of standing to Zaid. So there is a bind here. There is a bind here. In Arabic, we call it nisbah. Nisbah. So how many we have now? Nisbatun. Okay, so we have three things. Number one, we have the number one, and it is Zaid, which is the mawdu. Number two, we have the mahmul, is standing. So in Arabic we say qa'im, is standing. Number three, we have what? Nisbah. Nisbah, yani we can translate as associatement. Nisbah, associatement. And then we have number four. This is also mentioned by the author, if you look at the matan of Sullam. Number four, yani is the occurrence. I will give example later. Occurrence. Okay, so we have four things here. Number one, number two, number three, number four. So now when we go back and we look at this example, we have Zaid. So understanding this word, idraku mufradin, and the author said, idraku mufradin, this is mufrad. Basically the meaning of mufrad is a particular word. Understanding the meaning of mufrad. This is tasawwur, he said. Let us go back to what he said. He said, idraku mufradin. To understand the mufrad. So this is one word. So to understand, number one, the subject, and then we have the predicate, and then we have the nisbah. All this are tasawwur. Idraku mufradin tasawwuran ulim. Understanding a particular word is called tasawwur. This is what the author said. Understanding a particular word is tasawwur. Tasawwur is apprehension. That is, when you go back to the sentence, you understand each of the meaning of the words. What is Zaid? Zaid is a person. Standing is an act, it's an action. And then nisbah is ascribing that action to Zaid. This is basically the meaning. Zaid is standing. So number one is tasawwur. Number two is tasawwur. Tasawwur apprehension. Number three, nisbah, to find the binding between what you call it, the mawdu and mahmul. So all this is tasawwur. 1, 2, and 3. This is tasawwur. But when it comes to number 4, now we speak about the occurrence. We ask the question, is Zaid standing? Now a person says Zaid is standing. Zaid is standing. When a person say Zaid is standing, this statement has a possibility that there is truth, meaning Zaid is really standing. There is a possibility that it is false. that Zaid and he is not standing. And for example, a person and comes to you and you are in a room and for example Zaid and he is somewhere outside the house. And the person and he tells you that Zaid and he is standing outside the house. You did not see. So there is a possibility that Zaid and he is standing, there is a possibility that Zaid and he is not standing. If you come into the conviction that Zaid and he is standing, and if for example you go out of the house and you saw Zaid and he literally is standing. Now we say the occurrence of this statement has been fulfilled. Meaning we have come into a conviction, for example, that this statement is correct. For example, by observation, or by about 20 people and they come to you and say that Zaid and is standing. Now this is what you call it in hadith, and we call it khabar mutawatir. Many people and it comes to you and say that Zaid and is standing. So you come into the conclusion of conviction that Zaid and is standing. But if you come into a state where you do not believe any, for example, and you are saying any Zaid and is not any standing. So either you believe the occurrence of the sentence, or you do not believe. Now this is the meaning of tasdeeq. This is the second part. So this is what the author is saying. وَدَرْكُ نِسْبَةٍ بِتَصْدِيقٍ وُسِمٍ. وَدَرْكُ نِسْبَةٍ to believe in the nisbah. To believe in the association of the mahmul and the mawdu'. When we say Zaid and he is standing and you believe that Zaid and he is standing. So this conviction that comes from you, this is the meaning of tasdeeq. And because tasdeeq comes from what saddaqa yusaddiqu tasdeeqan. You basically, you believe. Or a person and he comes to a conviction that he said that Zaid is not standing. That is also tasdeeq. And he comes into the conviction. So now when we go back to the four things. So again, there are how many things? Four things. Zaid, which is the subject, is standing, which is the predicate, and then we have the nisbah, the association. So all these are tasawwur. But when it comes to number 4, the occurrence of the statement, this is tasdeeq. When you believe, when you come into a conclusion that you believe that Zaid is really standing, now this is called tasdeeq. So this is the majority of logicians, the manatiqa, their way of understanding the difference between tasawwur and tasdeeq is like this. Except for Imam Fakhruddin Ar-Razi. Al-Imam Fakhruddin Ar-Razi mentioned understanding everything, all these four. Every of this is a pillar in tasdeeq. So he said that you can only attain any tasdeeq by having the tasawwur for all four things. If any of the things is not attained as an understanding, then there is no tasdeeq. So basically he is saying then all these four categories they are the pillars of affirmation. If anyone is not present, then the affirmation cannot be achieved. But that is not any opinion that is chosen. The opinion that is chosen is the opinion of the hukama, we call it. The philosophers. They are saying that the first three is shurut. The first three is shurutu tasdeeq. The conditions of the tasdeeq, of the conviction, of the occurrence of the sentence, or of the of a claim, for example. So these are the conditions to attain number 4. So Zaid is tasawwur, standing tasawwur, nisbah is tasawwur. Once we understand this, then only we can ask the question whether it is a true or it is a false statement. So when we come to an understanding that it is true, then we say it is tasdeeq. Or a person say it is false, then it is also tasdeeq, but it is on the negative side. So this is basically what the author meant when he speaks about tasawwur and tasdiq. He wants to give us the understanding of this, some of these terms. So we read it again. He said, idraku mufradin tasawwuran ulim. Idraku mufrad, understanding the word. Now this goes back to how many things? The three things. So this is tasawwur, apprehension. Wa darku nisbatin, this is number 4. To understand and to believe the occurrence of the nisbah. It is called bitasdiqin wusim. It is mentioned as the tasdiq. So this is the difference between tasawwur and tasdiq. So tasawwur is understanding the words and the association of this subject and predicate. Tasdiq comes into the state where we come into a belief, or we come into a conviction that it is true, or it is not, true. So this basically some of the notes that I type. So I say a mufrad is a word that does not carry any ruling. This definition of a mufrad, and it's basically a word. The author began by explaining the difference of tasawwur and tasdiq. Understanding the mufrad, a word is a form of apprehension, whereas tasdiq is to believe in the occurrence of what was associated with that word in the sentence. Concluding the occurrence or non-occurrence of the associated is known as affirmation, tasdiq, by the scholars of Mantiq. Knowledge which is qadim is the opposite of new knowledge. New knowledge is divided into apprehension and affirmation, and both of them are divided into daruri and nadari, simple knowledge and cognitive knowledge. Understanding the mufrad, singular noun, is apprehension. Understanding the occurrence of the association is any affirmation, as what we mentioned. So this is an example earlier we gave. Zaid is standing. The sentence consists of 4 types of apprehension. Number 1, apprehending the subject, which is Zaid. Number 2, apprehending the predicate, which is standing. Number 3, apprehending the association, which is ascribing the act of standing to Zaid. And then we have apprehending the occurrence of the action, that is the affirmation. The first 3 are the conditions of affirmation, that is the madhab of the hukama, while Imam Razi mentioned that affirmation is apprehending all the 4 above. The author is inclined to the madhab of hukama. So Al-Imam Al-Akhdari, he is inclined to the madhab of the Al-Hukama. Al-Hukama, if you translate, it can mean the philosophers in general. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. Now we go on to the next one. He said, وَقُدِّمَ الْأَوَّلُ عِنْدَ الْوَضْعِ لِأَنَّهُ مُقَدَّمٌ بِالطَّبْعِ. The first, that is apprehension, is always discussed first before affirmation. So this is a principle. Whenever we are looking at sentences, we always have to look at the apprehension before affirmation. Affirmation can only come after apprehension, not any otherwise. Because initially we need to understand the meaning of the sentence. And in understanding the meaning of the sentence, we have to understand every single word that is mentioned in the sentence. So naturally, as what the author mentioned, naturally we are able to come to a state of affirmation only after we have apprehend the content of that information. So this is basically what the author is saying, وَقُدِّمَ الْأَوَّلُ عِنْدَ الْوَضْعِ. The apprehension is always discussed first before affirmation. لِأَنَّهُ مُقَدَّمٌ بِطَبْعِ. Because of the fact that it is always started off first in usage, and it is a condition to understand apprehension. Before any affirmation, we always have to understand the words that make up the sentence. Now this is basically what he's saying. I think there is no issue, easy for us to understand. So this is the beginning of the lesson in Mantiq, understanding words, understanding sentences, understanding associatements, and then when it comes to whether it is true or false, then we are in need of evidences, and when it comes to evidences, then we speak about syllogism and qiyas later on. So this basically the author is giving us a bit of a foundation, bit by bit, until we reach the the main any topics. So we have to be familiarized any with some any of these terminologies. Now he said knowledge any which is al-hadith is divided any into daruri and nadari. So he said one nadari mahtaja lit-ta'ammuli wa aksuhu huwa daruriyu al-jali. Yani he mentioned that knowledge also is divided into two categories. So number one, we have knowledge that is nadari. So I translated as cognitive knowledge. Is something that requires contemplation. So knowledge that is nadari, it requires thinking. Yani, for example, if we say, for example, the world, the universe is contingent. Yani if a person is in doubt, and we saying that the world is contingent. A person say, how does the world is contingent? How do we understand the contingency of the world? So we say to him then one of the reason that we can understand that the world is contingent is the fact that it is subjected to change. So anything that is subjected to change is contingent, because it ceases to exist at a certain time and exists at a certain time. So this requires some contemplation. This is nadari. But for example, if I say that the sky is above me and the earth is below me, now this is daruri, this is the opposite. Knowledge that is not in need of contemplation because of the clearness of the meaning. Because of the clearness of the meaning. Like for example, we understand that we are in existence. This is naturally, we understand. 1 plus 1 equals to 2. This is daruri. Or half of 2 is 1. This is daruri. But when it comes into nadari, for example, we say 1 times 80 divided by 4 plus 10 divided by 2 plus 4. All this, if you given this kind of sum, mathematical sum, now you are in need to sit down and to slowly solve the equation. Now this is nadari. It requires thinking. It requires contemplation. So basically, the author is saying that knowledge is divided into two parts. We have knowledge that is simple, which is daruri, that can be understood easily without any contemplation. And then we have knowledge that is nadari, that requires contemplation. Now this is basically what he is saying. And then I wrote down a few things. These are some of the notes I did last time when I teach, when I taught Sullam I think 2 years ago. So I wrote some notes and gave to the students. So these are the examples. So let us look at this example. Simple apprehension, and this is knowledge that is daruri. That 1 is half of 2. Concepts of fire and water. That fire is hot, water is is cool. So this is daruri. And everyone knows that fire is hot. So we are not in need of contemplating. Cognitive apprehension, that is half of 1/6 of 12. Concept of invisible spirits, jinn and the soul. So all these are cognitive apprehension, and it requires study. It requires study. It requires contemplation. Example of simple affirmation: understanding the association of 1 equals to half of 2. Fire is hot and ice is cold. Examples of cognitive affirmation: understanding the association of 1 equals to 1/6 of 12. So this is cognitive. You require some time to digest. The universe is created. Contingent. That's what we mentioned. It is called cognitive affirmation. This is an example of cognitive affirmation. Understanding the association of 1 equals to 1/6. So here what I did was I mentioned simple apprehension and simple affirmation. Then we have cognitive apprehension and cognitive affirmation. So when we spoke about apprehension and affirmation, we have understood the meaning of apprehension, understanding a particular word, and then affirmation is to come to a state of belief about the occurrence of the what is being said in a particular concept or particular sentence. And then we have the simple, which is daruri, knowledge that is daruri, and knowledge that is cognitive. So let us go back and look at some of these examples. So we do it slowly. When we speak about simple apprehension, this is tasawwur, that is daruri. Tasawwur that is daruri. One is half of two. Concept of fire and water. And then we have cognitive apprehension. Yani cognitive, but it is in a form of apprehension. That one is half of 1/6 of 12. This is an example of cognitive apprehension. And then we have the example of simple affirmation. Now you speak about affirmation, understanding the association of 1 equals to half of 2. So when we look at the sentence 1 equals to half of 2, we come into a state of affirmation that we believe that this is true. Now this is tasdiq daruri. Tasdiq that is daruri. And then we have cognitive affirmation. Tasdiq that is nadari, understanding the association of 1 equals to 1/6 of 12. This is an example of cognitive affirmation. So how many things we have now? We have tasawwur daruri, tasawwur tasdiqi, and then we have tasdiq daruri and tasdiq nadari. So these are the 4 things that we have learned about the difference between nadari and daruri, and the difference between tasawwur and tasdiq. So every part of tasawwur we is broken up into two parts. We have the daruri and we have nadari. Likewise, pertaining to tasdiq, we have daruri and we have nadari. So basically, tasdiq is when we come into a state of affirmation and belief of what is being said from the tasawwurat, from the sentences that is mentioned. So it can be cognitive and it can be simple. Now when we go on to the next part. So the author mentioned wama ila tasawwurin bihi wusil. Before that we read again the part before. Before that, wa nadhari mahtaja li ta'ammuli, yani nadhari cognitive, something that is cognitive is what is required requires contemplation. Ila ta'ammul, ta'ammul is contemplation. Wa aksuhu huwa daruriyul jali, and the opposite is the daruri, the simple apprehension or simple affirmation. Al jali meaning something that is clear in apparent in meaning. It doesn't require us to think much. Now when we go on to the next part, the author mentioned wama ila tasawwurin bihi wusil yud'a biqawlin sharihin faltabtahil. Let me demonstrate an example. So we go back into our whiteboard. So now the author speaks about a term that is called qawlun sharih. So let me give you an example. We have for example the statement al-insan hayawan hayawanun natiq. we say human beings or humans are intellectual beings. So now when we have this subject and the predicate, so again, as what we mentioned, this goes back to Tasawwur. Yani we have the subject and we have the predicate, and then we have the nisbah, yani the association between humans and intellectual beings. This kind of tasawwur, where the predicate explain the definition of the subject, explains the definition of the subject in terms of its essence. In Mantiq, we call it two things: had and qawl sharih. This is considered to be qawlun sharihun. So the author is saying, the author is saying, if you have a sentence where it explains the essence of the subject, so this is called qawlun sharih. This is called qawlun sharih. So this is a type of definition. So this is what he is saying. He said, "Wama ila tasawwurin bihi wusil," that an expression that reaches the objectives of apprehension. And why we say objective for apprehension? Because apprehension is about understanding meaning. So when you have a sentence that explains the meaning of a particular word in detail, in terms of the essence, and also the difference between what is mentioned and the other things that is within its class. So now when it explains, so this is called yud'a biqawlin sharih. It is called like a complete sentence. And I translate it as a qawlun sharih, and it is a complete sentence where the understanding of that particular word is achieved. So this is, we call it the definition. So this is another chapter in Mantiq that we will learn. How are we able to differentiate between a good definition from a bad definition? So definitions are one of the purpose of learning the chapter of Tasawwur is to understand definition. That is why after this, inshallah ta'ala, we will enter into the chapter of learning about how to make the proper definition. Because in order for us to understand fully about a particular word, we have to go back to the proper definition. So the knowledge of Mantiq gives a lot of emphasis and importance to understand any definition, because by understanding any definition, you will not make a mistake in understanding the subject. So this is a type of tasawwur that is called qawlun sharih. So it gives you the proper understanding or the proper tasawwur of a particular word. And then he mentioned wama litasdiqin bihi tuwassila. In the next part, and he said, now when he speaks about tasdiq, so when he speaks about tasawwur, he speaks about the objective of tasawwur, and that is definition, qawlun sharih, and to understand definitions, and basically. Then he said, وَمَا لِتَصْدِيقٍ بِهِ تُبُصِّلَ, and anything that reaches the level of affirmation, بحجة يعرف عند العقلاء is called يعني hujjah, evidence, by the scholars any of Mantiq. طيب, any for example, when we are able any to come any to a state any of affirmation, for example, any if a person yani you tell any a person, for example, the world is contingent, the world any is contingent, and this person any asks you, for example, what is the hujjah, what is any the evidence? So we say everything any that is subjected any to change is contingent. Everything that is subjected to change is contingent. So contingent any meaning it accepts non-existence and existence. So when it changed, yani before it was non-existence, now it is in existence, or before it is in existence, then it is non-existence. Like for example, this is what we spoke in Aqidah, yani in Aqidah Sanusiyah. This is moving, correct or not? Movement and is, we call it an accident, and it is contingent. Now it is in still mode, stillness. So the movement is not in existence now. Now it is in stillness, correct or not? There is no movement. So movement and is non-existence. When I do this, now movement and comes back and into existence. So this is an example, and we say earlier on it was non-existent, now it is in existence. Earlier on it was still, now it is moving. Or earlier on it is moving, now it is still. So earlier on and it is not in existence, then it comes into existence. So this type of being is contingent, because if it is pre-eternal or eternal, it cannot change. So when we say, for example, anything that is subjected to change is contingent. So now we say the universe is changing. Yani now people believe that the universe is expanding. Correct or not? The universe is expanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, for example, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And we are constantly expanding the universe. So now any scientists by observation they can observe with conviction that the universe is expanding. So this is one of the strongest proofs for the contingency of the universe. So where is our hujjah now? Now we say the universe, we say for example, anything that is subjected to change is contingent. This is the first premise. The universe is subjected to change. Then what is the conclusion? The second premise, the universe is subjected to change, and by observation. What is the conclusion? The universe is contingent. So here we use a kind of syllogism as a proof to prove that the universe is indeed contingent. So we can come into tasdiq by the presence of evidences, by the presence of the hujjah. So this is what the author is saying. وَمَا لِتَصْدِيقٍ بِهِ تُوَصِّلَ بِحُجَّةٍ يُعْرَفُ. Yani anything that reaches the level of affirmation is called hujjah, evidence by the scholars of Mantiq. It is by evidences that brings us towards belief, towards tasdiq, that we affirm that this particular sentence is correct. So inshallah we will stop here because of time. Next week inshallah we will enter into the next chapter, that is Anwa'u Dalalatil Wad'iyyah. Anwa'u Dalalatil Wad'iyyah. We will speak about formulative significations. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.